Steampunk Minecraft, a good mod pack that can be great with cannons. That's right, in today's video, I'm adding cannons to this mod pack. We're gonna go through a step-by-step process on how to make these cannons actually work, because trust me, there is a lot of trial and error. We're also enchanting, finally. But yeah, this one is gonna be a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy. I mean, how could you not? We're making cannons! This is the next episode of Steampunk Minecraft. You want to play mod packs with friends, but you can't seem to find a good server. And the free ones? With the big mod packs these days, free servers are just too laggy. Luckily for you, there's BISECT hosting. They host my server, and with plenty of affordable options, they can host your server too. And the best part is, they support almost every mod pack. Use code Doublesal at checkout for 25% off your first order. BISECT hosting, a great site for great servers. With all the gunpowder we can make, it was only natural that I take this course, so to get things started, we're gonna make a wooden cannon. And if that doesn't make sense to you, well, that's because it doesn't make sense. You don't make a cannon out of wood, and for good reason, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's make the cannon. So I started off by making some andesite casings to make this base where we're gonna mount the cannon, and then, well, we have to fire something out of the cannon, so we're gonna need gunpowder. We're gonna combine that in a basin, and once it gets pressed, you get what's called packed gunpowder. Now, the reason you need packed gunpowder is because it's used to make a powder charge, and to make a powder charge, we're gonna have to get some wool along with some string to craft what looks like toilet paper. But what we're gonna do is combine the toilet paper with the powder, and once you do that, you have a powder charge, and basically, they look like paper towel rolls now. That's an upgrade. But these paper towel rolls are more deadly than they look, because they are gonna provide our ammunition the propulsion it needs. Speaking of ammunition, this is what we're gonna fire from the cannon here. All we need is some iron, as well as some nuggets and some slabs, and there you go, a deadly cannonball. Well, it's not a ball because this is Minecraft, but you get the idea. Anyways, there is the base of our cannon. Now we're gonna assemble. We have our hollowed logs, and this is gonna act as the foundation of everything we're gonna do in this video. It doesn't look like much, but it's a step in the right direction. All we gotta do was load it up with the cannonball as well as the powder charge, and to do that you need what's called a ramrod. It's basically a big stick that you use to push the ammunition into the back of the cannon. There it is, that's the ramrod, and once you have that, all you have to do is right-click the back of the ammunition and it just goes in. Same thing with the powder charge, as long as you click in the center. And now it's time for the moment of truth. We attach the back of the cannon, and now, will it work? No. And that is exactly why you don't build a cannon out of wood, so we're gonna have to use more advanced methods with more advanced parts, ones that will be more suited for explosives, and as you can see, each part has a different strength. So to get us started, we're gonna have to use the stronger material, that being iron, and it's pretty simple. You just use a gunpowder and some iron sheets, and like that, piece by piece, you start making the parts of your cannon. They're not that difficult to make, and here we go with the base, and once again, we're loading up the cannon. It looks identical to the wooden one, same shape and all, same size, but is this one gonna work because it's made out of iron? Well, you guessed it, this cannon did not work. I don't know if I built it wrong, but we're moving to cast iron now. It's an upgrade from iron itself. I guess cast iron is a little bit stronger. To make cast iron, we're gonna have to use a blaze burner along with the basin where we're gonna store our iron ingots. They're gonna have to get crushed by a mechanical press that's right above them, and once you have the heat and the pressure, they form into cast iron. The next step is to craft a lid made out of andesite alloy, and the reason we need a lid is because it's gonna go right on top of the basin, and let's say you put ingots in there like I'm doing in the video. Well, you put the lid on top, fuel the blaze burner, and the lid helps the ingots melt. And the reason we want our ingots to melt is because we need a bucket of molten cast iron to extract the molten iron from the basin, because usually I try to right-click it with a bucket, but that doesn't work. I'm gonna have to pump it out using a fluid pump. It's gonna go into the fluid tank there, and there I am attaching the spout. I'm gonna put the depot down there, and all I have to do is place the bucket on the depot for it to fill. But before I do that, I have to wait a little because this stuff pumps so slowly, but once it's finished pumping, it goes into the bucket, and there we have molten cast iron. And I'm not gonna make the mistake I've made before of accidentally lighting myself on fire, because I gotta make sand. Reason being, we have to pour the molten metal into the sand to actually get the shape of our cannon. Once the molten metal cools, it actually becomes the cannon blocks, which we dig out, and from there we can make a cannon. But first, let's craft some sand. So I'm gonna have to get some clay along with some sand itself. I don't have sand, so instead I'll crush sandstone with my grinder, and there you go. You combine sand, clay, and dirt, and you get what's called casting sand. but we also need something called a mold. You see, you have to get the shape of the cannon inside the sand before you actually pour the metal, and the molds actually make the shape, but you'll see what I mean once we get started. I tried killing one of these enemies with the molten metal, but it didn't act like lava, so I guess it's not harmful to you, but I'm still not going to dive in and see if it hurts me. Anyways, it was time to build the actual setup to make the cannon itself. I started placing some sand behind the cake factory, and the sand was going to act as the cast for our cannon. After that, I began setting up the fluid tank along with every pipe and pump. Next, I began to set up a blaze burner along with a basin. That's where I was going to be melting the cast iron, and here is what the setup looks like when it was running. So here we go. We're adding the mold, and you have to right-click the mold, and now the sand takes its shape. You can see the texture even changed. You have to do it layer by layer for every block of the cannon. And once you do that, well, you're ready to go. All you have to do is fuel the blaze burner so that it can get nice and hot, and regular temperature won't do. It has to be hot to melt the iron ingots. Once they're melted, you gotta wait a little longer so that it can be poured into the cast, and once it cools and solidifies, you remove the sand, and all you're left with are these big blocks of cast iron. But it's not a cannon yet. To wrap this cannon up, I was gonna have to break the blocks, but to do that, I was going to need a silk touch pickaxe. So yes, it was finally time to make an enchanting table. For all of you pestering me about not making one and about going this long, almost a year into the series without enchanting a single tool, you can finally rest. I'm making one. So I got into my gyrodyne, I flew past my TNT monument, and I found a local village where I was hoping to loot some bookshelves. I carefully landed on the platform and began looting everything I could get my hands on, including the bookshelves there, and I'm so happy for these modded villages because they have so much loot. I continued wandering around until I came across this one hut that actually had tons of free emeralds for the taking. And I don't really use emeralds, but they are just amazing to have. Why? Well, I just like them. So I continued mining bookshelves, and once I had an ample supply, I got back into the gyrodyne, flew back to the base, and crafted the bookshelves. With these bookshelves, I was going to build a very basic enchanting room. You see, this is a steampunk series, and I don't want to put too much emphasis on magic. We're trying to use technology to progress. No cutting corners here. So, the enchanting room is going to be a hole in the wall, quite literally. I dug a hole in the wall, placed down the books, did the bare minimum to get the enchanting table set up working, and once I placed the enchanting table and illuminated the room, all that was left to do was enchant the pickaxe, but first I had to see if this worked, and yes, you can enchant guns. I don't know what enchantment you're going to put on a gun, but hey, it's possible in this mod pack. Now, it was finally time to do the one thing I strive to achieve. Enchant the pickaxe with silk touch, and thankfully I was lucky enough to get it on the first roll. Look at that animation, by the way. That looks amazing. Now, for the pickaxe itself, it had silk touch, and once it was enchanted, it was finally time to continue the project of making the cannon. So with my newly enchanted pickaxe, I made my way back to the surface, where it was finally time to mine some good old cannon blocks. But we were far from completing our project. With the blocks mined, I had to stop the flow of the cast iron from spilling out of the pipes, so I blocked it with some sand. And then I had a little celebration by dancing around with the blocks. Now it was finally time to upgrade the setup and take it a step further. Now we had to add the automated cast iron production. That way we could have as much cast iron as we wanted going into the basin where it could be melted down to make even bigger cannons. So we built the setup that you're familiar with, and then I built a little reference made out of mold so I knew exactly how much sand I was going to need. Once I had the reference complete, I decided to shape the sand with the molds I had set aside, and with that I was well on my way to making an actual functioning cannon that doesn't blow up when I try to launch anything out of it. Here's a fun little detail that I wanted to point out, just in case you didn't notice. For every block that I add to the length of the cannon, the blocks actually get thinner and thinner. This is because the barrel of the cannon is getting narrower and narrower. So yeah, there's actually going to be some cool shapes that we're going to work with in this mod. I then threw in some iron ingots into a basin where they were then converted into cast iron ingots. It then went down the belt where it would enter the second basin to be melted down into the molten metal. The molten metal was then transferred into a fluid tank where it then be poured into the sand. It filled the sand, and once the sand was full, we had to wait for the metal to cool down so that we could actually start working on our cannon barrel. And you can use a redstone comparator along with some Nixie tubes to track the the progress of the cooling. And once it changes to 51, that's when you know it's done. So I broke the sand with my shovel, and on the inside, you're not gonna believe what I saw, a beautiful barrel that was ready for processing. Yes, the next step of this process was to actually hollow out the cannon barrel itself. Now, how do you hollow it out? Well, you don't do it with a pickaxe. You actually have to use a special type of drill. So I removed the pipes so that we can make way for the opening. And this drill, well, we had to craft it. It's not your regular create mod drill. It's a special cannon drill that's powered by water and other rotational forces. It drills in the inside of the cannon barrel, making it hollow, and sometimes it spits out some debris. It's super easy to craft, and there it is, but now it's time to add the next source of power, the water itself. I made a simple pool of water right next to the cannon barrel that we were about to work on, and then I immediately began placing each block so that we could power the drill. I added some shafts so that we could give it some rotational force, and this thing was a tall sucker. It had to be the length of the cannon barrel itself. I then added the pipes to connect it to the water, and once that was complete, I had to add some transparent tubes there so I could see that the water was flowing, and then I moved the blocks over, hence the reason I needed a silk touch pickaxe. I assembled the cannon right underneath the drill and glued it down. I don't think you have to glue it down, but better safe than sorry. And yeah, the cannon also has to be rotating while you drill. If the cannon's not rotating, then the drill won't activate. So there you go, the cannon is getting hollowed out, iron chunks are being spit out from the sides, and thank God you can actually recycle these iron chunks back into ingots. You don't have to melt them down again, so props to the mod creators for thinking of everything. It's good to recycle, my friends. That's the lesson of the day. Anyways, there is the cannon barrel, and it's ready for the next step. We have to add some components to the hatch where we're going to be adding the ammunition. There is what looks like a steel bar. That's going to go in there. We add a shaft, and then here I am adding the steel bar, and it's all going to make sense once we assemble the cannon. But here's what the pieces look like once they're hollow. At that point, you can break them with a regular pickaxe. There's a lever that I had to craft because that is the only way to actually open the cannon to add the ammunition, and I added it, but you can't see it until I place the block down properly, and there it is. Beautiful. Anyways, let's make a cannon carriage because we have to move this cannon around somehow. And if you don't know what a cannon carriage is, well, it's basically that. It's a carriage that moves a cannon. I crafted some wheels, and then I crafted the carriage itself. And it's a pretty great model for Minecraft, not gonna lie. They did really well when it came to designing this thing. Before I proceeded, I wanted to stop and place the cannon to actually admire all of the details that went into it. That, and I had no idea how to actually use the thing, so I was gonna wing it. I started placing blocks in places I thought looked appropriate, and there it is. I mean, that looks just about right. Now, how do I actually connect the cannon to the carriage itself? Well, that was going to be a little tricky because every time I right-clicked, no cannon present. So we had to figure something out. Thankfully, there was a solution. We had to weld the cannon together. So here I am making what looks like a little blowtorch, and once I had that in hand, well, basically this acts as the equivalent of gluing blocks together, but instead of gluing them, we're going to weld them. So I had to weld each cannon at the joints block by block, and once the cannon was finally welded, all I had to do was right-click the cannon carriage with my wrench, and like that, we finally had a real cannon. Now, the big question was this cannon gonna blow up like all the other ones? Well, I hope not, because I put way too much work into this, and it just looked too beautiful for it to be destroyed in such a hasty, horrible way. So there it is. Let's finally test this out. I got the ramrod ready to load the cannon with more ammunition and gunpowder. Let's open up the hatch and add the stuff inside. I added each item, and now, look at that. It exploded. I don't know why, I don't know how, so it's time to do this again. Maybe I misplaced something. I made a second cannon, built a little target board so that we could test its destructive power, and look at that. It was a dud. So not only did it explode before, but this time it didn't want to explode at all. I don't get what it is. Maybe I just have horrible luck, but who knows? Let's try it again. Third time's a charm. We add the ammunition, we add the powder, and this time, finally the cannon functioned like a cannon. There we go, it's about time. There's the crater it left behind, but I wanted to take it a step further, so I figured out that you could actually raise and lower the barrel, so this was gonna change its accuracy. And like that, we actually hit a building, and look at that, another dud, but it did convert some of the blocks into cobblestone. I kept firing, hoping that it would actually demolish the blocks, but no. Well, I guess we're gonna have to work on it a little more, but we have come a long ways from the wooden cannon that we made at the beginning. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully we'll come back next time a little more prepared. Who knows, we may even build a battleship. If you want the builds you saw in the video, be sure to support me on Patreon, where all the schematics will be available for download. This has been Doublesal. Have a great day.